The Nintendo 64 era 3D platformer is a criminally underdeveloped genre of video games. Most indie developers opt to develop 2D platformers that harken back to the NES or SNES era of games, whilst the vast majority of AAA developers don't even remember that 3D platformers exist, N64 style or otherwise. Of course, with games like Yooka-Laylee, A Hat in Time, and Super Mario Odyssey coming out in the future, perhaps the genre will see a resurgence, but as of now, it is a style of game that deserves much more love than developers are currently giving it. Today, I'm going to be reviewing one of the first attempts to rekindle the magic of the N64 era platformer by an independent studio, Poi, a game developed by a small indie studio known as Polykid and released in early 2017 after a decently long stint in early access. One quick look at Poi, and it's abundantly clear that the game wears its inspiration on its sleeve. Poi is very much inspired by Super Mario 64. From the way your character controls, to the way you choose missions when you enter a level, anyone who has played a 3D Mario game is going to feel immediately at home when they first start playing Poi. Poi's main character's moveset is extremely similar to that of Mario's, with a few key differences that do set it apart. You can jump, double jump, triple jump, wall jump, and roll jump, and everything controls great. Your actions are smooth, fluid, and responsive, and the camera works well, all must-haves for a 3D platformer. Outside of the basic game mechanics, the core level design is another area that is obviously inspired by Super Mario 64. Each of Poi's 4 main levels are split up into 7 different missions that will have you collecting objects, platforming, exploring the environment, or fighting a boss. These objectives are generally fine, though the boss fights are a bit boring and bland compared to the rest of the game. However, I can't help but wish that the game had a few more original ideas to throw into the mix. Level design is solid throughout most of the game. The game introduces new platforming mechanics and challenges at a steady rate, and I never really felt bored going through the game's main areas. The level design succeeds the most at combining linear platforming challenges with more larger, open-ended, exploration-based areas. The main levels are comparable in size to a game like Super Mario 64, and within each of the levels you'll be doing a fair amount of exploration combined with straight-up platforming. Poi's levels reach a solid middle ground between the more open-ended nature of Super Mario 64 and the more linear, straightforward nature of Mario Galaxy 2 or Super Mario 3D World. Where Poi begins to falter is its hub world. Exploring Princess Peach's castle in Super Mario 64 or Gruntilda's lair in Banjo-Kazooie was a joy. They were large and filled to the brim with hidden secrets and things to find. They felt like levels in and of themselves. Poi's hub world is conceptually cool. It takes place in the wide open sky, where you can paraglide around to find floating islands and control an airship to take you to the game's major levels. I use the word control loosely, as you merely have the ability to turn the airship to face an island in the distance and then press a button to fly the airship to it. You have no real direct control over it, so in the end it feels like a clunkier way than just allowing you to choose a level from a menu. The paragliding mechanics are a bit better, allowing you to fly around the world at your leisure. You can freely fly to the various islands strewn about the world and find whatever might be there. The issue of this is that there is barely anything to find in the world, outside of a few generally easy to obtain collectibles. New islands and NPCs will pop up in the world as you progress through the game, but the game gives you a blatant pop-up message whenever they unlock and shows you exactly where they are, disallowing any real form of exploration. You will simply fly to whatever area unlocks as it unlocks, and see what's there. There's no exploration, there's no mysteries to behold, and very few secrets to find. 90% of the things that Poi's hub world accomplishes would be done better in a more efficient manner if it simply allowed you to pick things from a menu. The second major area where Poi needs major improvement is the way progression works. As mentioned earlier, the game's main levels have 7 missions each, and completing these missions will earn you an Explorer Medallion, the game's main form of collectible. These missions are the best content the game has to offer. However, doing them will only give you about 28 out of the 101 total medallions. The rest of the medallions are earned from doing side content, which ends up being extremely hit or miss, with the majority of that content leaning more towards the miss side. A couple of smaller, not as elaborate levels in the game's linear challenge levels are both fun to complete, until the game makes you complete the aforementioned challenge levels again, this time with not well-hidden keys to collect. Having to explore the 4 main levels for hidden locations and collectibles also ends up being fun to do, because it is content that placed to the game's major strengths, exploration and platforming. But having to take pictures of every unique enemy throughout the game, or having to complete grind-heavy tasks like jump X amount of times or defeat X amount of enemies, isn't fun. It's pure unadulterated filler. It feels like the developer didn't have the budget or time to create more levels, but needed to create more content, but did so in a way that ended up being detrimental to the overall game experience. Poi looks great, both from a technical and artistic standpoint. The game isn't pushing any boundaries, but it doesn't really need to. The art style is solid and feels like a modern take on the platformers of old, while still having a unique look to it. The game will run at a silky smooth 60 frames per second on the vast majority of hardware. The only fault I have is that certain areas end up looking a bit bland. The music is fine, albeit a bit on the unmemorable side. The music fits each area well enough, and there's enough tracks throughout the game to keep the player from being bored of hearing the same one over and over again. You likely won't find yourself itching to buy the soundtrack after beating the game, nor will you likely get any of the tracks stuck in your head, but in the end it is a mostly inoffensive soundtrack that serves the rest of the game well. Poi does a lot of things right. It mostly succeeds in bringing back an era of platforming that has mostly been forgotten. It controls and plays well, and there's plenty of fun exploration and platforming throughout. But Poi does not surpass or even come close to reaching the heights of that era. The hub world is banal, and there's way too much filler content throughout. That's not to say Poi is a bad game, because it isn't. There is enough to like in this game to justify a purchase as you wait for Yooka-Laylee to release in a mere few weeks, or for A Hat in Time to release eventually.